Outside the Line. AT&T, your true choice.
This is where the romance of the past overwhelms the cynicism of the present. This is where the spirit of football gets more play than its balance sheet. Here, the talk is plain, but the emotions are profound. This is Green Bay, and this is Lambeau Field, the epicenter of Titletown, USA. On this edition of Outside the Lines, we will have the Green Bay story, more than the championships and the epic moments on this field, because this is a story of the here and now. It is a story of the city, his team, and these people. Because as Jimmy Roberts reports, for the fans, the game is just simply part of a long ritual of worship.
28 degrees on a Sunday morning in the parking lot at Lambeau Field. Kickoff is hours away, but prime space is already scarce.
It is remarkable that this is Green Bay, Wisconsin, and that's what it's all about.
It certainly is to one Rudy Rutherford, who 3 years ago turned his old Subaru into a kind of highway helmet, a rolling Packer shrine.
Every time I bring this car, they win. This paint here is the original paint from the leftover from when they built that Don Hudson Center. Got it from the contractor, and that's why I painted my car up.
If you don't live in Green Bay, Rudy Rutherford with his lovingly hand-painted Breathe Right strip probably seems a bit different. Actually, being a fan here by definition is different.
Like in New York, they throw stuff at the players. Well, the players, they throw themselves at us.
To seemingly all the people at this frigid asphalt picnic, the Packers are the moon and the stars.
Brett Favre, Jimmy Roberts. Jimmy Roberts. How you doing? Brett Favre.
Brett, good to see you. But even if they have other responsibilities come game day, it is clear the Packers have left their mark.
Yes, fellas, I wouldn't take $1 million for this cow. Brings me luck every day.
And so in this place where kids do the Pack Arena and adults their own dance of worship, where there's no confusion about priorities.
God, country, and the Green Bay Packers. That's the way it is.
And an astounding 90% of the local TV audience has been known to tune in for a big game. The feeling here is that of a college football town without a college football team.
Well, we're only 100,000 people here in the city. Well, 200,000 in the greater community area. So, I mean, that's a neighborhood in Chicago.
In fact, Green Bay, Wisconsin is the smallest city in North America to house a major professional sports franchise. Still, the last time the Packers didn't sell out a home game in Green Bay, Dwight Eisenhower was president.
Of course, in Green Bay, I don't think there's a heck of a lot else to do either. But all kidding aside, it has been something that's passed down from generation to generation.
Witness the Pigeon family. 88-year-old Norm, who was at the very first Packer game back in 1919. His son Tom, and Tom's son Scott.
Did you have any choice in life? What if you had decided that you wanted to be a Cowboys fan?
It wouldn't have happened. I was born a Packer fan. Just growing up, everything was the Packers.
And he means everything. Sometime after Scott's father went to his first game back in the 40s, he started collecting Packer stuff. He just never stopped.
And here is radio tapes of Packer games going back to the early 70s. These are all albums of Packer game action. Here's Floyd Breezy Reed, played with the Packers in the 50s. I've been collecting newspapers on the Packer game since 1956. Back behind you over here are newspapers and boxes from the 40s. 16mm films on Packer games. I don't think I'm eccentric, but I suppose when you're fanatical about something, you could be accused of being eccentric.
Tom Pigeon says that friends don't think he's nuts. They just think he's got a nice collection. Deep down, this guy who works at the Fort Howard paper mill over on Broadway is no different from the lady who cuts hair over on Oneida, or anybody else for that matter.
The Packer fans are very loyal because this is really the main thing in Green Bay. And they just love their Packers. They will never leave us. They'll always be with us.
Now, it would be easy to dismiss that as just so much blind optimism, especially in these days when professional sports franchises seem to be about as anchored as leaves on an autumn lawn on a windy day. But the fact is, the Packers probably never will leave this town, and that, to a large degree, explains a lot of this Packer mania. And in most towns, it seems like the team owns the town. Around here, it's actually reversed. This town does own the team, literally. Through economic happenstance, the Packers became a not-for-profit, 100% publicly owned team in 1950. And so fans bleed green and gold.
I have scars on my hands where I've gotten a little bit upset and have put a fist through one of our wood doors going down to my basement area. It wasn't tough going in through the door, but pulling my hand back out did hurt.
Call them Middle America's team. Of the people, by the people, and certainly for the people. So help me God.
The people in Green Bay refer to the Green Bay Packers as we. We did well on Sunday. You know, it's that kind of affinity.
That the dawn of his coming.
Most of the time, you will find Father John Blaha tending to the flock at St. John's over on 9th Street. But Sunday afternoon, he does what many around here consider to be the Lord's work. Toiling for the exalted Packers on the equipment staff.
It's a faith-filled community in Green Bay for more than just the Packers. But on game day, I mean, it's really shown in the response to the team.
We often say that to so many fans, football is like a religion. But perhaps here in Green Bay, it is most true. Not because they love their Packers more than others love their teams. No, because like a religion, the Packers are something in which their following can invest total, unquestioning, blind faith. They may sometimes be disappointed with the outcome, but as long as they continue to show their devotion, they know that the object of their faith is not likely to desert them.
We live for the season and, you know, for all the new things that are going to happen with the Packers, so it's, I guess it's a way of life.
Still ahead on Outside the Lines, how African-American players work and live in an area with so few blacks. Also, how Lombardi's success was a burden for the Packers for an entire generation after his death. And next, the Packers saved time and again by the people of Green Bay, who still own their team.
I've said this many times, it's besides my wife and my children, it's the most important possession I own.
Green Bay, how many people does it take to change a light bulb at Lambeau Field? The answer is 3. 1 to change the bulb, 2 more to sit around and reminisce about what a great job the old bulb used to do. It's obvious that the past frames the present and the future here in Green Bay. This is Old City Stadium, and this is where the Packers played from 1925 through 1956. The city of Green Bay is a survivor of that unique time in NFL history when cities as small as Pottsville and Portsmouth and Duluth, cities like that could field an NFL team. They are all gone. Green Bay is still here, but at times it has been anything but easy. In fact, the people of Green Bay were inspired several times through this century to reach into their pockets to keep the Packers alive. Homegrown help from people equally proud of their self-reliance, their fanatical devotion, and their epic football history. Brett Favre recalls the day he was traded here.
The biggest thing was, God, Green Bay. I'm not exactly sure where that is, but I know it's cold.
I like to tell people that it's a cold city with a very warm story.
Mike Holmgren arrived from San Francisco and was soon introduced to the city's football soul when he encountered a woman in her 80s at a supermarket.
She sees me, and then we stop, and she stops me. And she goes, "Hey, California, let's kick some butt." And I go, "Now, this is a different deal."
That emotion is caged in a small city, the smallest by Major League standards. 5 companies in the Forbes 500 are headquartered here, along with a history of paper production, specifically toilet tissue. That's the cornerstone of an economy that withstands recessions, smokestacks, and steeples. 90 churches in a city of less than 100,000.
You don't have the knives, the guns, the fights, any of that stuff. This is just good old countryside USA in a lot of ways.
With a history to match. Curly Lambeau was 21 when he founded the Packers in 1919. The local packing company provided jerseys, and 4 years later, local businessmen formed a non-profit football corporation. Lambeau's Packers were dominant with 6 NFL titles and Hall of Famers Don Hutson and Tony Canadeo. A dominant team often on the verge of bankruptcy. In 1949, Curly Lambeau was rebuffed in his attempt to organize a for-profit ownership. He left town, and the Packers turned again to the people of Green Bay, this time selling shares in the team.
I was a program seller. I was about 14 years old, and I was making about $5 a game out at the old City Stadium. And I used that money and bought my share of stock.
The team raised $118,000. What a good player today earns in one game. In 1950, that sum saved the Packers and delivered them 9 years later into the hands of Vince Lombardi, who led them to historic seasons. Now, in the 90s, with the Packers dramatically reborn as NFL powers, Lambeau Field remains a place where there are still no seat licenses, no seat backs, no chance of buying a ticket, and little chance of winning as a visitor. It is, in spirit and practice, an environment unique in professional sports.
Part of the uniqueness is that you could be standing in line at Dunkin' Donuts and have two of your owners behind you.
Or your owner's probably serving you. That could be, yes.
Because 1,900 individuals hold about 4,600 shares of Packer stock. The franchise would yield an estimated $170 million on the open market. But each share of stock has the identical value as the day it was first sold in 1950, $25. No one has ever sold a share back to the team.
There's no interest, there's no dividends, no benefits, no season tickets.
Simply pride of ownership.
I've said this many times, it's besides my wife and my children, it's the most important possession I own.
Elsewhere, the term NFL owner conjures images of millionaires, power brokers with financial empires. Not in Green Bay.
Come on, Hathaway.
Herm Reckelberg is an NFL owner. Good. 2 shares worth at $25 each.
I transferred one to my daughter's name, and I have one, and I have it in my will that my son will get it after me. So I've been offered a great deal more for the opportunity for someone to buy it. But we can't sell it directly to these people. It has to be transferred back to the Packer office, and they in turn okay it to whatever person it's going to be going to.
How much you've been quietly offered to arrange a sale?
Well, it's over thousands.
Well up into 4 figures.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And people wanted why? Because
just to hang on a wall saying that they're a shareholder of the Green Bay Packers.
Which entitles a person to attend the annual Packers shareholders meeting at a local hotel and question team executives. The Packers are governed by a 45-person board of directors and a 7-person executive committee that hires from its ranks a president and CEO. But there is no single all-powerful owner.
It's very different. I mean, we don't have barbecues we have to attend. There aren't dog and pony shows that we have to show up at. Our purpose here is to run the football operation.
I have the best job from a coaching standpoint of anyone in this league. We don't have an owner who can at times be volatile or be upset about something.
You can't have a wealthy owner come in and buy this franchise and say, well, I'm going to move it someplace else because I can make more money someplace else.
The Packers do make money, a record $5.5 million profit last year. The franchise has $21 million in the bank and access to credit beyond that. Green Bay apparel sales trail only Dallas. And the Packers showed their free agent muscle in 1993 with a $9 million bonus to Reggie White and recently re-signed him to a $19 million extension. Ticket demand is surreal. Sellouts each Sunday in Green Bay since 1960 and a true waiting list just a bit longer than the party line of 40 years.
But we said to our accountants, if we would lose 5 accounts every year, how long would it take the gentleman, the last name on the list, to get tickets? And it's just a little over a 3,000-year wait.
For tickets that remain the least expensive on average in the NFL, $30. The Packers, more than any team, rely on NFL revenue sharing and the discipline of the salary cap. Last year, 84% of Packer income was money shared by the league, and 3/4 of that was network TV revenue. In the unlikely event it all ended, NFL revenue sharing and public stock ownership of the Packers, in the event the Packers would go out of business, all their assets would be donated here. This American Legion post would realize at least a $100 million windfall. That provision in Packer bylaws dates from their birth in the 20s. In the 90s, what might possibly trigger a doomsday scenario? Changes in revenue sharing and runs around the salary cap. Up here, that means Jerry Jones, an on-field rival crossing swords in the executive suite.
Well, it's certainly two ways of doing business in the NFL. There's no question about that.
Dallas is corporate. Dallas is J.R. Ewing. Dallas is Jerry Jones. You've got good versus evil. You've got everything that makes it a great story.
Including the part where the people of Green Bay vow to arrive once again in the nick of time to save the Packers.
All they would have to do is to let the Packer fans know throughout the state of Wisconsin and the rest of the country that they're in financial trouble and need their support. And myself and the countless thousands of other Packer fans would pull out their checkbooks and ask how much.
Next, the men who have followed Vince Lombardi to the Packers sideline. Success has only arrived lately in the shadow of this coach, whose memory is now introduced to an entirely new generation.
No, that ain't canasta they're playing out there. This is football. It's a very emotional game.
Vince Lombardi etched not only his name in history, but his character as well. Such that 26 years after his death, Lombardi's persona is the centerpiece of a major commercial campaign. Lombardi portrayed by Jerry Stiller.
Hey, Shakespeare, shut your pie hole and let's play football.
They said, well, they being a man named Ernest Lupinacci, who said, we saw you on Seinfeld. You play this guy named Frank Costanza, and you're always screaming at everybody. And we think that you would be the perfect kind of embodiment of Vince Lombardi.
You bust up a big play and score a touchdown. Fellas got to let it out.
And then when he explained to me that it was going to be the ghost of Vince Lombardi visiting back today, dealing with the players today, the Deion Sanders, the Reggie Whites, the Steve Youngs.
Hey, Steve, you know that ball you're running around with? Well, toss it to Rice, for Pete's sake.
I got very turned on by this idea.
There was the resemblance between the two men, each short, stocky, each a New Yorker, with similarities that seemed to go beyond coincidence.
I learned a lot about him. For instance, I discovered that we both were born in the month of June. He was born June 13th.
Oh, God, get him out of there, will you?
I was born on June 8th.
Tell you, that kid makes more moves than United Airlines.
He was a Gemini.
Hey, interference! Interference!
I was a Gemini.
You know, that ain't canasta they're playing out there. This is football. It's a very emotional game.
I also discovered that he wanted to be a priest.
What the hell's going on out here?
I wanted to be a rabbi.
Holy moly! Hey, Sanders, you lost your shoe!
All these things started to coincide. And I said, my God, this is really something really very mystical.
If you look at this play, what we're trying to get is a seal here and a seal here, and try to run this play in the alley. Anyway, take it from me, forget your fancy sports drink and get yourself some bicarbonate of soda.
What I do on Sundays sometimes now, which I never did before on every Sunday, is I sit in front of the TV set, or maybe Monday night, and I start watching Green Bay, and I watch Brett Favre, and I start screaming at him like I'm Lombardi. Hey, you're doing good. Or, hey, come on, what are you doing? He didn't pull him by the face mask. He hit him on the shoulder. Didn't you see that? What, am I talking to myself?
More than a quarter century since his passing, Vince Lombardi is the centerpiece of a major ad campaign. But when he first won this trophy, it was not named for him. And in the many years since his passing, the long shadow of Vince Lombardi's life's work and these championship trophies has fallen across this franchise and the men who coached where he did.
What are they doing through the center of that line out there? Too much out there!
There's a tremendous weight on his shoulder because of the gentleman that really and truly created all this. I mean, his record will never be topped in professional football.
I drive home on Lombardi Boulevard, you know, and past Lombardi Plaza and Lombardi Middle School. And I mean, the name, of course, you can't escape it, but I don't think I want to.
I happen to sit in his office, so right now, so there are ghosts in this building.
I mean, I could name a ton of their players. You know, Bart Starr, Paul Hornung,
Fuzzy Thurston, Max McGee, Ray Nitschke. I can go on down the line.
Lombardi's mystique was grounded in his results and his approach, a positive, strident philosophy, and a fierce demand for perfection that bordered on tyrannical.
Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, look
We
at
always
me.
had this fear. We had not seen the worst in Lombardi. I mean, his grass drills would be good for the prison.
I had a very good relationship with Coach Lombardi. It was more like a master-slave. And you can guess which one I was.
Hey, Phil, get your defense together now. Will you please? Get them together up there a little bit. Go ahead.
That so-called Italian emotional outbreak that would come out of him at times, I think was meant for effect. He always had his hand in his overcoat pocket. He could fly off while he had that hand in his pocket at the players and hollering instructions and so on. And I said, Vince, is it possible that you got your hands on your rosary? He says, you're right.
His Packers won 3 consecutive NFL championships and 5 in a 7-year span. Lombardi grew to be more than a coach. He was the icon of the can-do new frontier.
Lombardi had the private number of John F. Kennedy, and he got me, Ray Nitschke, and Boyd Dowler out of the Army so we could come back and play the New York Giants. Tell me another football coach who had the president's private number.
When he died at age 57, Vince Lombardi was the man by whom Green Bay measured itself.
It was September 3rd, 1970 that he died. And I only remember that because that's the day our youngest was born. And the pediatrician comes into my wife's room and says, Audrey, Vince died. Vince died. And by the way, you have a beautiful baby girl.
The thunder of Lombardi's record was an empty echo through Phil Bankston's 3 seasons succeeding his boss. 3 years without a playoff appearance.
Being a second banana for 35 years, never being a head coach, and following the legendary Lombardi, I think it was just too much for almost anyone, not only Phil Bankston, I think almost anyone who had stepped into that role.
Dan Devine followed, a college coach. After 1 divisional title, his team stumbled. Devine endured cruel treatment from some Packer fans. He, too, was measured against Lombardi.
No, I can't say that that hurt me. And I just wanted some of the players, some of the players that played for Lombardi, to play more like he would wanted them to play.
The thing that kept it alive even longer was the fact that after Devine, he had 2 coaches hired that were part of the whole Lombardi story, and Bart Starr and Forrest Gregg.
Bart Starr had only 1 year of coaching experience as an assistant under Devine, but 5 championship rings as Lombardi's quarterback.
How do you say no to an organization which asks you to do that you have a love affair with? And I've always had that with a Packer organization.
Good high knee action, good high knee action. Get him up.
He was here for 9 years. He said that if it hadn't been me, Bart Starr, I wouldn't have been here that long. You know, he was realistic, you know.
So I just simply should have known better with a lack of experience to not do it.
Starr's successor was a proven NFL coach, Forrest Gregg.
Obviously, he'd taken the Bengals to a Super Bowl in the early 80s, but that Lombardi link was important.
I think it was important. I think there was always a tenderness to hire a Packer.
The thing with Forrest Gregg was that I always thought he tried to imitate Vince, and you can't do that.
And I knew that I couldn't be Vince Lombardi. My makeup wasn't the same.
First of all, you don't compete with reality. You compete with a memory.
But the number one thing is you have to be yourself.
And you can't compete with a memory because it's unreal.
In 1988, the Packers finally left the Lombardi family to hire Lindy Infante. Infante, like every other coach since Lombardi, had a losing record in Green Bay. Current general manager Ron Wolf is the first GM since Lombardi with full authority over his coach.
Because Vince Lombardi could do those 2 jobs and be successful, we kept assuming everybody could, and everybody could, and everybody couldn't.
I believe it is impractical for me to try to do both jobs, and I feel I must relinquish one of them.
Wolf traded for Brett Favre after he hired his coach. His success, after a generation of mediocrity, proved Lombardi's prophecy. 5 years later, the Lombardi legend is still decoration, but not obsessive motivation.
I don't think that hangs over the organization anymore as a weight. I think it now is a part of our tradition.
And it has to rub off and wear off on some of our players, younger players. We tried to do that when we came back here by initiating an honorary captaincy program.
There is a comfort level with Lombardi's unparalleled record, a comfort bred in the current success. Yet comparisons to the past continue.
You're looking at the same thing right now that we faced as Green Bay Packers during those 50s. Everybody in Green Bay talked about the Curly Lambeau days. They talked about all the great players that were there during the time. I thought those guys were 7 or 8 feet tall.
You know, it's about this time every year we start hearing it. You guys come in and start asking questions about it. And it gets a little bothersome, but once again, until we do something about it, it's always going to be there.
Ahead, the men who wrote that history, how those days and their coach continue to define their lives 30 years after their last championship. Lombardi's personality, so powerful. The championship experience, such a bond. The men of Lombardi, even today, have memories of their coach perhaps more meaningful than his own son.
My dad may have been a bigger influence in some of their lives than he was for me. Simply because he was with them in a more intense relationship.
African-American Packers are stars on the field and sometimes a curiosity on the streets of this small city.
I feel uncomfortable sometimes just driving my truck down the street because if I stop at a red light, I'm going to be looked at and stared at, you know, just because I'm a black player.
If there was one man whose voice captured the men and the moments of Green Bay's glory, it was Ray Scott. His reflections on that time and this town ahead as we continue inside Titletown, USA. Accomplished in their time, forged the legacy that continues to define this city. But their championships and their rings are 30 years or more old. Yet these Packers continue to recall those times in a single voice. It is the voice of their coach. And as Dick Schaff reports, they can hear him clearly, even now.
Of the 40 Green Bay Packers who played for Vince Lombardi in Super Bowl I 30 years ago, 37 are still alive. And Vince Lombardi, who died more than a quarter of a century ago, still lives in every one of those 37 men.
Unless a man believes in himself and makes a total commitment to his career and puts everything he has into it, his mind, his body, and his heart, what's life worth to him?
Like I tell people all the time, I love my father, who is deceased also, but I don't think about my father every day. I think about Coach Lombardi every day.
He's the kind of guy that's with you every day, you know, and anybody that's ever met him and worked for him and played for him realizes he's right with him.
Vince Lombardi really has an influence on Dave Robinson every day. 365 days a year, 366 on leap year.
Go out there and play this ball game like I know you can play it.
These are Lombardi's people. They are his legacy, perhaps even more than his own children.
My dad may have been a bigger influence in some of their lives than he was for me. Simply because he was with them in a more intense relationship. I quite honestly would be jealous sometimes of the relationship that my father seemed to have with some of his players.
Winning isn't everything, but it's the only thing. In our business, there is no second place. Either you're first or you're last.
My life would have been very, very different had it not been for Lombardi. I was ready to quit. You know, I was at Green Bay. We won 4 games in 2 years. Our last year, we were 1-10-1 before Lombardi arrived. And I had had it with the Green Bay Packers.
In 1959, Lombardi became the Packers' coach.
The first day he came there, he made this speech, and he said, "Okay, guys, if you don't want to play winning football, get out of here right now." And he said anybody could walk out of that room and become a free agent, so to speak. And you could hear a pin drop. And after that meeting, and I was one of the veterans, and, you know, and we were walking back, and him and I were kind of next to each other, and he said, you know, I had no idea how many people would be left after I said that.
No one walked out. Lombardi took basically the same players who had been losers in 1958 and turned them into winners the following year, into division champions the next, and into NFL champions the next.
When he came to Green Bay and invited about 9 or 10 of us up in the spring, late spring, we broke after about an hour and a half of meeting. I ran downstairs, got on the pay telephone in the Packer office, and called my wife, and all I said to her was, honey, we're going to begin to win.
He could see what we could become, and he felt that it was his God-given responsibility to close that gap.
I think we can accomplish most anything if we're willing to pay the price, and the price of success is hard work.
Lombardi's Packers won 5 NFL championships in 7 years, including Super Bowl I and Super Bowl II.
We're going to expect a 100% effort at all times. Anything less than that is not good enough.
Of the 22 men who started for Green Bay in Super Bowl I, not a single player had played on a national championship team in college. Only one, linebacker Dave Robinson, was a first-team All-American. Only 2, Robinson and defensive back Herb Adderley, were first-round draft choices. Hall of Famers Willie Davis and Bart Starr weren't drafted till the 17th round. And Hall of Famer Willie Wood wasn't drafted at all. Vince Lombardi took the unsung and the unknown and made them into champions.
Without football, without his philosophies, you know, I haven't the slightest idea where I'd be. Maybe back in Sandpoint driving a logging truck or something. I don't know.
As successful as the Packers were on the field, they were equally successful off the field. More than a dozen of them became millionaires. Max McGee, for instance, founded Chi-Chi's restaurants and sold them for a fortune.
To me, it's always been make the big play. You know, you can make some mistakes, but when something's on the line, you got to make the big play.
Willie Davis owns half a dozen radio stations and has been on the board of directors of dozens of companies ranging from MGM to the Green Bay Packers.
One thing that's happened in my life that I attribute to Lombardi almost totally, and that is that, hey, I don't ever enter anything or wake up in a day and think of losing. I mean, when I take on a project, I said, gee, I don't know how successful it's going to be, but we're not going to lose.
We're not going to walk in there and lay 1,000 pounds on the table.
Jerry Kramer, like so many of his teammates, goes into business meetings the way he once went into huddles.
I feel guilty if I don't get things done and do them. I hear his voice saying, you don't do things right once in a while, you do them right all the time.
A few of the Packers, like defensive end Lionel Aldridge, have not flourished financially, but may have won larger battles.
One of the first things they'll have to do in the second half...
Once a promising network announcer with a magnificent voice, Aldridge suffered from schizophrenia, lost his job and his family, wound up literally in the gutter, where his Super Bowl ring was stolen off his finger. Still, he remembered Lombardi's teachings.
Without a doubt, the most important thing was never give up. You know, never quitting. I mean, this has become a part of my life.
Aldridge didn't quit, fought schizophrenia with medication and dedication, and now tries to help the mentally ill by lecturing on mental health.
A man who is trained to his peak capacity will gain confidence. Confidence is contagious, and so is a lack of confidence.
11 of the men who played for him in Green Bay have joined Lombardi in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. But it is what Lombardi's people have accomplished after the games that would probably most delight their old coach.
That's great. You would love it. He'd be so proud of all of us.
If he walked in the door right now, what would you say to him?
The first thing I'd do is give him a big hug.
I'd say, hi, Coach. I finally can have a drink with you.
The Packers would all like to raise a glass and drink to Lombardi.
The question of being black in Green Bay is no different than being white in Harlem, and that's the reality of it.
Next, how black Packers create a zone of comfort in a region with so few minorities. Prepare to go to work. And if you're looking for a particular player, you can usually find him by his nameplate or his uniform number. And when the players go home from work, they're in a city that is simply dominated by the colors of green and gold. But the African-American players, and that is 2/3 of this roster, are often identified here as Packers simply by the color of their skin. Here's Greg Garber.
The question of being black in Green Bay is no different than being white in Harlem, and that's, you know, that's the reality of it.
You know, we're the black people, and there are not any.
People have to understand that being a black player in Green Bay is very difficult.
Green Bay is the seat of Brown County, which, despite its name, has a population that is 99% white and 1% black. When the locals see an African-American here, they're pretty sure they know what he does for a living.
Up here in Green Bay, if you're black, you're pretty much on the football team. That's the perception of things around here.
They come up and ask you, you know, are you a Packer? Which one are you? And I think that's kind of the most irritating thing.
I have to agree with some of the guys. I mean, it do make you feel uncomfortable when people do walk up to you and say, which one are you?
And away from the field with civilian clothes on, black athletes' identities aren't always discernible to Packer fans.
When you call me Reggie White and you call me Sterling Sharp because of the color of my skin, the first thing they probably look at, it really bothers me.
And sometimes people confuse non-players with players.
I mean, to me, they all look the same, but I just recognize that they're Packer players.
So, how did you know?
How did I know? Well, one of them was wearing a Packer jacket, and the other way I knew was because they were black. I mean, I'm not discriminating or anything like that, but I just, because the main football players are black.
But all blacks aren't players. Antonio Freeman, on the left, was the only Packer in the group. His childhood friend James Arnold was wearing the Packer jacket. 18 current and former black players and coaches were interviewed for this story. And while they acknowledged it was sometimes difficult living in Green Bay, all of them insisted they harbored no ill will toward the local fans.
I would say there's very little racism. I don't think it's too much. I mean, it's everywhere, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it's as bad as other places.
You know, when you think about an area with just, you know, just white population, you think of a lot of prejudice in your mind. You're going, I don't know if I want to go to a place like that. Totally opposite. I mean, a lot of the stereotypes are just torn up and thrown away once you get here and you go, man, this is a great place to play.
You may run into people that never seen black people eye to eye. You know, only thing they know about blacks is what they see on TV.
And you kind of run into them at any type of function or whatever, maybe at the movies, and it's, you know, people get nervous. You know, it's almost to the point where they're nervous.
Is it because they're nervous because you're a Packer, or is it because
I think, you know, the Packers have been here long enough where, you know, they're beyond the Packer thing. You know, when you're a black player, you know, there's a little difference.
But is there different treatment for different black players? In Brooks' first 3 seasons, he averaged 30 catches.
Before, you know, 2 years ago, that was when I was getting, you know, the treatment where, okay, they don't know who you are, you know, they don't have a clue, and then it's just like, okay, who's this black guy, and what's he doing here?
Then, in 1995, Brooks broke through with 102 receptions.
Do you think people treated you differently? Totally. How? Totally. I mean, just the way they interact with you, the way they treat you in certain everyday situations. I think it's a question of being Robert Brooks, the football player, who's now caught a lot of balls, you know, opposed to Robert Brooks, the black football player who's just on the team, you know.
Still, Brooks says his new superstar status hasn't earned him a smooth ride through town.
I feel uncomfortable sometimes just driving my truck down the street, because if I stop at a red light, I'm going to be looked at and stared at. I'm still a human being. I'm still a person. And so I still feel uncomfortable, regardless of, you know, what I've accomplished on the football field.
Green Bay, the black players say, also lacks some of the small comforts they took for granted when they lived elsewhere.
Where do you go to get a decent haircut?
Right down here to the brothers on the team, man. Most all the brothers on the team can cut hair.
Now the Packers are trying to address some of the black players' basic needs. An example, a barber is brought in from Milwaukee every Friday.
Now this cut right here is a simulation of a New Orleans cut.
I think the organization is bent over backwards to try and understand the uniqueness of the franchise and the community and deal with the African-American athlete. You know, with the little things that they appreciate.
Another example, soul food is catered from Milwaukee twice a week.
Now we ask you to bless this food for the nourishment of our bodies. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen.
The players away from the job attempt to fill the void.
Go get him, go get him, go get him.
Tina Jones cooks every week for some of husband Sean's teammates and their families.
I'm Brian's family, and I'm Keith's family, and I'm Desmond's family. You know, I'm the whole team's family.
The players are on their own, though, when it comes to the social scene, which now includes, for some, a new element, interracial dating.
Most guys, like me, when I first came up here, I wasn't even interested in dating white girls at all. But my mom always told me that social Darwin is adapt to your surroundings. And if you're going to be active dating, you're going to have to date probably a white girl.
Butler says Green Bay is at ease with interracial dating now, but former Packer Mike Douglas says the attitude was different more than a decade ago.
You just didn't go certain places and more or less because it was looked at as maybe flaunting it in some of these, the guys' face, you know, and the white guys that lived in the city didn't like it.
Douglas's Packer roommate for 8 years, receiver James Lofton, was one black athlete who had a problem. Whether it was racially motivated or not remains unclear even today. But back in December 1986, Lofton was charged with second-degree sexual assault against a white woman. He was traded to the Raiders and later acquitted. Race is an issue that occasionally even seeps into fan mail. The Packers, like every NFL team, receive many positive and some negative letters. Still, there are reminders that their black players exist in a white environment. Last year, Mark Ingram received a welcoming letter from a Packer fan.
And they were advising him and saying that, look, you know, you got to know the difference between a good colored boy and a nigger. He said a good colored boy was guys like Willie Davis and, you know, some of the guys that from the past that were good colored boys. But he said that, you know, Herb Adderley and guys like that. But he said the niggers were the Terrell Buckleys, the Sterling Sharps, and things of that nature.
I was a nigger because of the fact that I wasn't public. I walked around. I never, you know, I didn't jump in the stands when I scored, or I didn't do anything that made me, you know, so the fans embraced me. I didn't do a lot of community work. I did my job, and that was not a good thing.
Packers players, black and white, acknowledge the pressure of playing against the backdrop of Green Bay's history and tradition. But for some black players, there's more.
There is a responsibility for not just the players, but the black players on this team to carry themselves in a certain way, because you're really carrying the burden or carrying the consciousness of a group of people because of how they perceive you.
Is that fair for you to have to do that? That's a pretty heavy burden.
Well, I don't know if it's fair or not, but it is what it is.
People expect, you know, black players or black people to do the same as white people, and that's in Green Bay. It is called Titletown. I think the title really will help all this easy. I think that goes above racism. If you win that title, you don't even care about anything.
The Lines is presented by AT&T, your true choice, and in part by Nissan, who reminds you that life is a journey. Enjoy the ride. And by the U.S. Army. Be a part of the toughest, smartest Army in the world. Be all you can be.
The critical issues in the Green Bay story from its very beginning are major issues around the NFL today. Fan loyalty, stable ownership, franchise location. These things are important around the NFL now. They have always been paramount in Green Bay. So now the final chapter of the Green Bay story will be told in one voice. If you're old enough to remember the Packers of Lombardi, you'll recall that many of their finest hours were captured in the play-by-play of Ray Scott. So now, the essence of Titletown, USA, from a man who reported so very much of it, Ray Scott.
If you walk down the streets of Green Bay, Wisconsin, a city of about 100,000, during the football season, and you were to ask someone other than a total stranger, what do you think of the game this week? The answer wouldn't be what game. There is only one in Green Bay, and that's the Packers. The Packers are more than their founder and longtime coach, Curly Lambeau, more than Vince Lombardi. It's a family of management, fans, of course, all the employees, including the Packer players and coaches. It is a big family. Reggie White has just signed an agreement which assures he'll finish his playing career with the Packers. He has indicated that he and his family intend to move permanently to Wisconsin when his playing days are over. Their talented quarterback, Brett Favre, has indicated he wants to finish his career in Green Bay. I'm asked many times about the famous or infamous Ice Bowl. It was miserable. Below zero temperature, terrible playing field. And I was down by the Packer bench in the closing moments when the special team had forced Dallas to punt. And as the offense took the field, Ray Nitschke, the emotional leader of that special team and the defense, said to the entire offense, "Don't let me down." We know now they didn't. That final drive was, to me, the greatest triumph of will over adversity in any game that I've ever seen or televised. I think that Brett Favre wrapped up the whole situation very well several years ago. The Dallas Cowboys had just won the Super Bowl, and Brett said, "When Dallas wins the Super Bowl, most of Texas celebrates." But then he said, "When we, the Packers, win that Super Bowl, all America will celebrate." I think he was right.